I am very excited. I finally found an archery build that is pretty good and I want to play. So today we're going to go over my magic marksman build. You can start playing this build very early in the game. Really the only things you need for this to get started are going to be the horn bow, some type of staff, and then one of the phalanx spells. The first one you can grab is the Glintblade Phalanx, which you can purchase after turning in the Royal House Scroll. The first NPC you can turn this into is Sorceress Sellen in Limgrave, so that's probably the fastest way to do it. And then you're also going to want the magic arrows. The arrows, I will say, are pretty easy to craft. You just need the bones, the feathers, and then some of the magic fireflies that are found in Liurnia. It took me about an hour to an hour and a half to farm all the materials I needed to max out the amount of arrows you can carry, which is 699. And I used those all the way up to around level 75, and they lasted me that long. So I would recommend just farming what you need and then play through your game. These are the main pieces of equipment you need for the build, but as you move through your playthrough, there are some additional items that you'll want to pick up that are going to help you. One really important one is the Spellblade set that you get from Sorcerer Roger as you progress through Ranni's questline. When you equip this full set, it's going to increase the damage of your magic-based skills by 10%. So that's going to help us with the weapon arts on both our hornbow and our sword, which I'll talk about in a minute. Also, as you progress through Ranni's questline, you will be able to pick up the Wing of Estelle. This is a magic-dealing curved sword that has a really excellent moveset and is very strong. It's one of the best curved swords in the game, hands down. The heavy attacks shoot out this little blue projectile which deal additional magic damage. I also like to carry around a shield. This one's totally up to you. I think the Carrion Knight Shield is a really good option. I ended up going with the blue gold kite shield just for fashion. And I put the Carrion Retaliation Ash of War on it so I could parry in situations where I needed to. For your staff, I'm using the Carrion Glintblade Staff. One of the main damage dealing spells we're going to be using is the Glintblade Arches, so this will boost the damage done by those. And for our talismans, I'm using the Magic Scorpion Charm, the Ritual Sword Talisman, and the Arrow Sting Talisman. We want to be boosting our magic damage as much as possible, as well as the damage done by our arrows. And because we're fighting at range most of the time, you really should be at full health. For our Wondrous Physic, I'm using the Intelligence Knot Crystal tier and the Magic Shroud and Crack tier just to further boost our magic damage. And the main spells you're going to want to be using are Loretta's Greatbow. One of the Phalanx spells, I ended up just using Carrion Phalanx once I unlocked it. But before you have access to it, the Glintblade Phalanx will do just fine. I also like to keep Freezing Mist around because I can cast it in front of me when enemies are getting really aggressive, and then engage them in the mist to use Frostbite to help burn them down faster. And lastly, Terra Magica. You won't be using this too much, but in situations where you need your arrows and Loretta's Greatbow to do a bit more damage, I'll usually put this one down. Alright, let's look at our stats real quick. Around level 75, you'll want about 30 Vigor, 20 Mind, the amount of strength and dexterity you need to wield your weapons, and then around 50 Intelligence. We don't need a ton of Vigor because we're trying to keep our distance from our enemy. We want a decent amount of Mind so that we can cast all of our spells, and Intelligence is where we're going to be getting most of our damage. Let's talk about how to play this build. For the most part, you're going to want to be using your Mighty Shot on your Hornbow to snipe down enemies from a distance. As long as you keep your Hornbow upgraded to a level that's appropriate for the zone you're in, you should be able to take care of most light enemies in a single shot. And I know people are going to point out that the Hornbow doesn't scale well with Intelligence, and it scales better with Dexterity and Strength. The truth is, if you put all of those points in Intelligence into Dexterity or Strength or both, you only end up with like another 10 or 20 damage because the scaling on bows is so bad. The truth is that it doesn't really matter much what you put your points in. It's not going to scale well based off of pretty much any attribute. And we're using our spells to sort of supplement our damage output from our bow, so it's more important to put points in Intelligence. When facing bigger enemies, or groups of enemies, I like to precast my phalanx spell so that I have some glint blades overhead, which sort of act as like a sentry. So when any enemy gets too close, it'll hit them. And then if I need them, I have freezing mist for an area effect, and also the wing of Estelle. So I mentioned earlier this weapon is really good. This isn't our primary method of engaging with the enemy, but sprinting away and using a bow attack and then sprinting away and just rinsing and repeating isn't very fun. So it's important to have some type of melee weapon in situations where you need it. And the Wing of Estelle both fits this theme very well, plus it's just an excellent weapon. You can stay very mobile with its attacks. It hits pretty hard and it does decent poise damage, especially if you hit them with both the weapon and the little projectile that it shoots out. And we also have to talk about the weapon skill that comes on the Wing of Estelle. You throw out this sort of cone of stars that explode after a brief delay. And this is excellent against really big enemies because each little explosion will hit them separately. And it can do really, really good damage, especially since we're putting most of our points of intelligence, which will boost the damage done by this skill. And we also have a shield for situations where we need it. You can parry or block when you need to, which works really well with the curved sword playstyle. This is a build that you can play up to around the point that you get to the capital city. At that point, you'll really start to feel the bow's damage starting to fall off. And that's because at this point of the game, you're relying on a lot of the extra damage you get from your weapon scaling, and bows just don't scale that well. So around level 70 to 80 or 90, I recommend you start looking for another build. But this one is an excellent and fun way to play from the early game all the way through the mid game. And who knows, maybe in the future they'll change the scaling on bows so that they're more viable later in the game. But for now, that's just not the case. All right, thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next one.